Hello and welcome from my side to this special session for the Virtual European Risk Management Awards. My name is Henning Hagen, Chief Regions and Market Officer with Allianz Global Corporate Specialty. As sponsors of the Risk Manager of the Year Award Private Sector, I'm delighted to introduce this session for you and also to congratulate the Risk Manager finalists of this category. I hope you enjoy the discussion and don't forget to access the awards presentation ceremony, which takes place this Friday, 11th December at 4:30 Central European Time. Good luck to all the finalists.
Hello everyone and welcome to the third event in this week's European Risk Management Awards Week programme. The conclusion, as you know, comes tomorrow with the awards ceremony at 4:30 Central European Time. Don't miss the big event. I'm Adrian Ladbury, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Risk Europe. I'm hosting this webinar for the next hour or so with the three finalists of the Private Sector Risk Manager of the Year category. Now, this is a prestigious award. Previous winners include Alexander Monk from Siemens, Germany, Eberhard Faller from BASF, also Germany, and Helju Laikala from Metso Corporation in Finland. Now, for this award, which is sponsored by Allianz Global Corporate and Specialty, as you've just seen, we reward a serious level of achievement. We're looking for individuals who've demonstrated excellent risk management structure and practice in action, innovation, and the ability to foresee risks and prevent dangerous end games. Now we have an impressive lineup of finalists here with me today. We have Carlo Cosimi, Corporate Head of Insurance and Risk Financing at Saipem in Italy, François Malan, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Eiffage in France, and Bernard van den Berg, Insurance Director, Royal BAM Group in the Netherlands. Now, all three of these finalists have, of course, achieved a great deal in order to reach this stage. Well then, guys, they're all worthy winners. But, in the immortal words of the Highlander, there can only be one. So what's happening over the next 45 minutes? First up, I'm going to ask each finalist one question. This will introduce them and give them a chance to express their approach and philosophy. Then we'll enter a group discussion led by me. Then we'll have time at the end for questions from you, the audience. Now, I've had a lot of questions this week, so please keep them flying in. And don't wait for right to the end to throw them all in at once, because it'll be very confusing. So let's kick off with my first question to you, Bernard. Bernard, what is, in your view, the essence of risk management? Big question.
Thanks, Adrian. I think the essence of insurance management consists out of two elements, actually. It's the first one is to set up and maintain a state-of-the-art insurance program with right balance between cost cover and certainty of cover. And second, and most important, is being very close to the business, driving prevention knowledge deep into the organization and stimulate the organization to learn from past claims and be there and support the organization when needed.
So I'll just ask a supplementary question to you there, Bernard. What do you think is the key at the moment with this difficult market for an insurance manager? What have they really got to focus on?
Now, focus, I think, is balancing cost and cover and certainty of cover. So don't forget that the value of insurance is there when the claim situation is when a claim occurs and we need to pay a claim, that the insurance company needs to be there and is also able to pay the claim. So the key thing is, I think, to take out the small claims, which you can bear yourself, and to focus on the biggies.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Bernard. So, opening statement from Carlo. Carlo, can you describe your background? How did you get into risk management? What's your current role? And what are your key objectives? And how have you achieved them?
Well, thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, Ferma from Milan. My university background is in economics with a master in corporate financial risk management. After graduation in 1994, I started my career in the financial sector of Eni, the Italian oil company. In Eni, I had the chance to work for one of their offshore captives. Thanks to this experience, I learned a lot about captive management, risk management, international insurance and reinsurance practices, and multinational programs related in particular to the oil and gas. After this experience, I moved back to Italy as head of insurance in a market company, when in 2006 I joined Saipem, that at that time offered me the opportunity to start up the first insurance captive in Switzerland. In 2010, I moved back in Milan, again took over the current position as head of insurance and risk financing, reporting to the group CFO. About my current role has been centralized at corporate level, and I lead a team of 24 people spread between Milan, Paris, and Zurich. I'm responsible for all lines of insurance, from property, casualty, construction risk, employee benefits, financial lines, cyber. And I also supervise and control our reinsurance captive, which plays in our model a very important role as a risk management tool, financing the primary layer of the risk while the excess layer are placed in the international market. Well, about my key objectives and their achievement in the last years, there are so many, from startup the captive and their impressive results, or success in recovery big claims. But there is one for which I am particularly proud, is the growth of a young generation of professional risk managers in my team. Their loyalty, passion, and their team spirit are surprising me every day.
I just think, Carlo, just a supplementary question for you there too. Very important point there at the end about education and bringing along the next generation, which is obviously going to be more challenging in the tough economic times that we're in at the moment. But to what extent, as ANRA, as the Association for Italy, and also FIRMA, they've been improving their educational work of late. That's obviously helping you with your career development of your team, I'd have thought.
Absolutely, yes, you are right. The younger generation of people are lucky because they have available a lot of courses available. For instance, our ANRA Academy, that I call our training and formation in the association, is let me say, is a must in Italy to have in order to, if you want to make a career in the risk management like us. In the past, when I was young, I didn't have this opportunity, let me say. Now, young generation are more lucky.
Yeah, it's a big new development. I mean, it is new. It's newish, but it's certainly quite impressive that what's going on in Italy, across Europe, and driven by FIRMA as well, which is going to help develop the next generation. That's great. Okay, François, let's move on to you. Now, you've been a risk manager for a long time, and you've seen the profession evolve. You've held different positions in risk management. In your opinion, what role should the risk manager play today within the organization, and how should they position themselves?
Thank you, Adrian. Hello, everyone. When I started my career a long time ago, the risk manager was more insurance buyer, and it was buying traditional insurance covers such as property, damage, liability, and managing claim. Since then, the job has really changed and become more diversified and more interesting, in my opinion. Risk mapping, risk prevention action, implementation of new coverages, cyber D&O, and more recently, some risk manager, like me, add some new string to their bow: compliance. But today, I have to deal with more than 80% of the risk identified in my company, which are not insurable. And that's a big deal. To give example, lack of talents, reputational risk, acceptability of my business and project, and it's really difficult to assess properly this kind of risk, and it's really a challenge. For me, we must remain expert to master the risk manager tools, risk mapping, business continuity plan. It's essential, but also we have to be trained in new risk, cyber, environmental, financial. It's really difficult for risk manager to be specialist in all this kind of field. The hardened market you mentioned is also a challenge, and especially for new risk manager, because for years we took the opportunity of a soft market. We had plenty of insurers ready to cover almost everything for low premium, but today we have to convince them to select our risk, and that's a great challenge for us. The pressure is really high, and we have to take our part of this challenge in our company. Furthermore, we have to develop a proximity, a connection with our board, and that's also an important point, because today the risk manager is closer to the board and closer to the managing direction. And it's really an important point because we have access to information, we can influence some decision. It's a start, but we are going to improve it. And also we work with different functions, with IT department, with sustainable development department, and we have more interaction than before. So we need to strengthen our proximity with the board and to be more proactive with them, just to be more part of the strategy of the company. And it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the role has become more complex, more diversified, as you say, starting from an insurance management background and moving into wider risk management. You mentioned their relationship with the board. Before I go into the questions that we have ready, I just want to ask that question to all three of you. Perhaps Bernard, you can kick off. In your experience, has the COVID-19 crisis helped the risk manager, the insurance manager, to get a more direct relationship with the board and with other parts of the group that previously was not there?
To be honest, no, I don't think so. I think especially insurance, as part of risk management, completely missed out on pandemic. We basically had a very short message to the board. It's disturbing the market. We don't foresee any cover for the COVID-19 disruption that we have.
Yeah.
What you see on the plus side is that risk management in general is also about surprises, and that also multifunctional, an organization can bounce back.
Yeah.
And that element of multifunctional bounce back has become very important in the COVID-19 crisis. Being able to work from home where you need ICT resources, clever solutions for starting up projects again, safety, very important, played a very important role in the bounce back and the reopening of projects. And that went amazingly rapid.
Yeah. And have you been involved in the sort of the crisis management, business continuity elements of how your group is coping with the crisis and moving on to the next phase?
We have split the roles and responsibility a bit because one person can't do it all, and I think that's key in risk management.
Yeah.
So the risk management framework and the COVID was more managed by risk management department and HR, and less by insurance.
Sure.
And we maintained focused on the ongoing business.
Absolutely. Carlo, what sort of impact has the crisis had upon your role and your structure and business? Has it risen your profile at Saipem in any way?
Yes, of course. We just to give you an idea, we are in smart working since last week of February. But notwithstanding, we carried out all the activity worldwide. Of course, there are some delay in some schedule. But because the important thing to say that we didn't have any contract cancellation, and for a contractor group, it's very important this. And we, of course, we had a very collaboration with our client in the management of the crisis, and also we put in place all the safety procedure that, of course, are normally to do in place. There is also the crisis room opened since last year that on weekly basis is arrange a meeting in order to follow the progress of the crisis. So let me say that we face the crisis in a very unexpected but positive way.
Yeah. This is a lot of feedback that I'm getting from your colleagues across Europe. I mean, obviously, it's not been an easy time for anybody, obviously, but there have been changes in the way groups, companies have regarded risk, the value of risk management and insurance management as well. François, maybe you could just give us a bit more about how you have actually sort of managed through this crisis.
Yes, of course. COVID-19 was a shock for everybody because we didn't expect it. We had just finished our risk mapping, and pandemic was just at the bottom of the risk mapping, because we couldn't expect such a terrible effect for such a long time. So we stopped our works for 2 months. So it was really terrible. We postponed our turnover. We have lost more than 20% of our turnover. 5 people of Eiffage have died of the COVID, so it's also a shock. It's not only a number; it's also people who have suffered, and so it was really a shock. But for a risk manager, I think for me it was a great opportunity to show what we could bring to our company. The BCP was not very well managed, so we had to deal with that and to find really quick solution with the procurement department to buy surgical masks. And we are also here to provide solution to keep the critical and essential activities. And I was really connected to my managing direction almost every day. It was quite new for me. It was also challenging, but and tiring, because it was difficult to work at home and with all the IT tools, which functions properly. And it was hopefully a great thank you to my colleagues. But I think it was an opportunity, and I didn't have a problem with my board to say we were not insured, because it was so a terrible event that even my board member couldn't expect that you could be insured for everything.
Sure.
But I had to explain to them that some were covered and some were not covered. So it was a big opportunity to see what risk manager could bring to the company in a crisis situation.
Absolutely. And I think I should imagine that the conversation about insurance and whether it actually is going to be triggered or used or not is going to help with the education of the board as to what insurance is for, the value that it brings, because suddenly it's brought the question out. I have heard as well from many risk managers across Europe that they haven't really had a problem explaining that the pandemic is not covered. But it has opened up the discussion, which, Bernard, you've had that conversation with fellow. It has enabled you to sort of educate your fellow managers about what insurance is all about.
Yeah, I think it also relates to the opening statement I made, Adrian, that one of the essences of insurance management is balance between cost cover and risk. Mm-hmm. And insurance is quite an expensive manner to transfer risk outside of your company. And as my colleagues also explained, it was very easy to explain to the board that if we have a global pandemic following up in resulting in stock markets going down, crises, a lot of deaths, etc., that also the insurance companies cannot bear with this consequence as it hits the whole world unexpectedly, and that we also did not pay any premium for that. Not only us, but also the other ones. So also here we have, for insurance management, really the clear role also to explain to the business that certain events are well insured, with high amounts of security where we can rely upon. But other events, small and big, are just outside that dynamics.
Yeah.
And I think that, as François explained, roughly 80% of the business and the risk of the business is not insured, and only 20% of events fall within the insurance range.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this whole year is probably made that a lot clearer and show the challenges and some of the opportunities for the risk management community and for the insurance community that supports it. Now we've got 2 or 3 questions that I have ready for you, but we do have one in from the crowd, which is good. Virtual crowd, of course. This is a good question, actually. Has COVID shown the need for a dedicated risk management function, i.e. a corporate own budget, resources, and board representation? Interesting question. Carlo, can I throw that one at you first?
Yeah, of course, let me say that the need for risk management function is independent from COVID or from any other communicable disease. You need to have in place a robust risk management team, procedures, and so on. Of course, after this experience of crisis, we know that we have to consider also big scenario like pandemic crisis that were not considered till now in the risk register of probably of our company. So we have to face new scenarios. We have learning by doing, let me say. We had a very good experience in this kind of crisis, medical crisis, also for the future. I don't, of course, I don't hope to see another crisis like that. But of course, the company are more aware about this kind of crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. François, I would presume that you would totally agree because you already have.
Definitively, yeah, of course. COVID has just showed that it's really important to have risk management inside a company. But just to add some things, I think COVID is a good also revelator that you have to review your risk appetite more often, because we have to keep our insurance budget, which could be reduced also. So we have to select the risk we really want to insure. And we have to find the correct deductible and not to buy a higher limit than you need. So I think it's a good opportunity for risk manager to have a review of their risk appetite.
Yeah.
Good. Use self-insurance maybe and develop alternative tools such as captive or a financial insurance mechanism. So I think it could be a good opportunity to do this, because our board is asking for this, and my CFO too.
Very good. Bernard, do you have a captive? Are you using it more? Are you retaining more risk, looking at alternative risk financing options, the kind of thing that François was talking about? Now is the time to do that, surely.
Yeah, we're looking at it. At this moment, we don't operate a captive. But exactly what François mentioned is we're looking at increasing the deductibles, retaining more risk ourselves within the business, and eventually structure that with a virtual captive or a captive solution in the background. One of the things to start off, and that's a difficulty with the captive, is that if you want to set it up in the first stage and it's not capitalized, that you need capital. And within a crisis, asking for capital, extending the balance sheet is a difficult question. And it's also expensive before you come to the point where it becomes a profit maker and a business enabler.
Yeah.
So we're not there yet.
No, not yet. Okay. Another question from the crowd, which is very much linked to that point. basically what role can self-insurance, i.e. captives, play in the management of future catastrophic risks, such as a pandemic? I mean, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, as we all know, the commercial insurance and reinsurance market cannot cover the risk entirely. So to what extent can you cover it yourself? And I think the phrase is often used for working perhaps directly with the commercial market. Carlo, do you want to have a pop at that?
Of course, it depends the role of the captive in this pandemic crisis depends on the level of capitalization they have, because the captive in Europe, captive and not offshore captive, have to respect the solvability model. So or Solvency 2 or the Swiss Solvency test, depends where you are domiciled. By the way, of course, if the captive is correct capitalized, can provide some support in retain or in buyback some market exclusion in terms of COVID. Of course, we are talking about the first primary layer of the risk, I imagine, because depends. If you have a captive, big captive with a strong capitalization, of course you can go very up to the level of in the liquidation of claims. Depends. By the way, it could have a role, in particular for the frequency layer, in particular to intervene. Let me say just an example. No, there are in some personal accident treaty some exclusion for COVID. Okay, you can buy back through the captive this exclusion and to provide some coverage to your employees.
Okay. Righty-ho. Right, Carlo, I'll stick with you for now and then move on to François. Can you give us 3 essential skills that risk managers need to focus on and develop in the future? That's a tricky question, but
let me say that I believe that there are 3 soft skills that I think are becoming important. To be visionary, to be persuasive, to be creative. First one, the risk manager must be visionary. He must have predictive skills, have the quality of perceiving changes, risk scenarios, and anticipating mitigation actions. Capability to read reality based only on data available is no longer enough. He must be able to grasp signals and build scenarios. Let me say, risk manager like an oracle. In ancient time, all kings asked oracle before waging war. Today, before launching a new strategy, launching a new product, or entering new market or country, CEOs should ask a risk manager about risk opportunity profile of the venture, and not just follow the operatives guy and salespeople without risk manager contribution. Second one, to be persuasive. Risk manager must be able to persuade, not only communicate, but able to convince his people, especially at the top of the company. It's possible to carry out detailed analysis and risk scenarios, but if we don't have the ability to communicate with the persuasion, any efforts will be useless. Third one, to be creative. I believe that creativity and innovation in the company should be diffused skill. The risk manager must be visionary in imagining risk scenarios and be creative in finding new solutions for transferring risk, especially in times as we are in the hard market. Creativity lies in the ability to cook a mix of traditional insurance programs with alternative risk transfer solutions. For sure, the presence, if you have a captive, can facilitate this cooking of mix. But I believe also that to be creative means that we have to try to innovate also the traditional insurance coverages with the market. Just an example. We know that a lot of companies are investing a huge amount of money on sustainability. are awarded and ranked at the top by international independent agency like Dow Jones Sustainability Index and so on. But all these efforts and results, how are they considered by the market? Why an improved and more sustainable risk profile is not recognized by the insurers today? Why all risk managers don't push all together to have in the insurance world some savings mechanism linked to sustainability targets to be achieved?
Yeah.
I believe that despite hard market, we must ask to open discussion on this point with the insurers. And personally, is my priority for the 2021.
Interesting, very interesting. So, François, maybe you have a sort of perspective on what Carlo just said there, particularly at the end, and also how can risk management help the company follow its sustainable strategy? I mean, what can it add?
I think we can help the company to assess the risk, because the CSR department, they have the knowledge of what could be the solutions, but the risk, we can bring the methodology of risk mapping to help them to assess the risk. And the difficulty is just to assess the consequences. How do you define the cost of a risk on the natural hazard or on the reputation? So my first action is to help my company to assess properly the risk, to help the company to assess it. And the second point is to find insurance solution to cover innovation. Because in our strategy, we need to develop new products or old products, such as wood. Wood is something, it's not new, but now we build towers with wood, and insurers are a lot afraid. So, oh, look, it's a problem. So I try to convince them that they have to be partners. And if we use low carbon concrete, or if we reuse metal for bridges, it's the same thing. They have the same rigidity. And the insurer has to help us to cover this, because we need to use this innovative solution to be low carbon compatible. So that's my great also challenge for them. But we find partners and insurers work with them in this solution.
Okay, Bernard, that's a really interesting point, and it's kind of linked into obviously what Carlo is saying towards the end there. Risk management has a lot to add to the sustainable picture, but the insurance market has got to play the game too. Bernard, what is your perspective on the input that you and your team can give on this big challenge at the moment?
Now, funny enough, the question was, when we made the strategy for the last years, also what is insurance, what is sustainability going to mean for the insurance?
Yeah.
And my first answer was nothing. And when I was pushed back and asked again, we also saw that a couple of insurers not only greenwash their business, but also put effort, capital, money into risk capitalization and in prevention. And in the selection of our insurance panel, when we work with a limited number of insurers, their sustainability goals, their sustainability behavior is one of the essential things which we monitor, and where we also say, well, if you're driving sustainability forward, you can also have a bit more premium, or you have a preferred spot on the BAM insurance panel. And I think that's really important. Second, I think it's very important that the insurance market realize that if that construction is essential if we want to change a couple of things. So if we put solar panels on tops of roofs, we need to make sure that fire insurance covers it. And we don't get all kinds of clauses in the market excluding these kind of developments. And that also should be part of their business to make the world sustainable. And also invest in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is progress. There are statements coming out every day. This morning, one of the big reinsurance companies based in Germany made a commitment about its sustainable strategy from an investment and underwriting perspective going forward, which is good news. But again, as with everything, it's got to be in tandem, hasn't it? We've got lots of questions coming in here, guys. Let's start tackling some of them, shall we? Okay, here's a good question. How will the role of the risk manager change in the light of the pandemic? Who's going to go first? Carlo?
Let me say that the risk manager during pandemic is in the spotlight, of course. And if he, personally, I say that my visibility and my contribution, risk manager, in risk management is important when there are crises. Let me say. In the companies, probably remind you if there is a big loss, if something happened, but this it's a very old-fashioned culture. Let me say, what have to change is the culture of the risk management in the head of our people, because the risk manager cannot arrive after a disaster or during a crisis. Have to arrive before. I provocate you before, saying like an oracle. Okay, before to move in a step, you have to ask cost, opportunity of each step that you are going to do to the risk manager. The contribution of risk manager should be preventive, not after disaster.
Definitely. François, perspective on this question? It's a big one.
Yes, a big one. I think as risk manager, we had to imagine what could be the risk. For pandemic, the risk is here. We know what could happen. Now, I think our role is to help our organization with specific tools. BCP, they were not really used, so now we have to improve them. Maybe to make them more efficient, because we had enormous documents, not always with the good names, so we have to maintain these tools, and we need also to use digital tools and to be more efficient with the tools. So that's my first point. The second point is to find solution, maybe financial solution, to protect the balance sheet of our company. We talk about captives, but we can also find different solution, financial solution. So we have to work with our CFO and the financial team, maybe to have provisions or to keep money in case of, and to assess the correct amount you need, not too much. It's difficult, but I think we can help our companies in that way.
Absolutely. And Bernard, do you have a point on this big question before we move on?
Well, I think the old-fashioned insurance manager is driven by fear. And I think in the new role of the insurance management, it's also about opportunity. And one of the things we can learn from the insurance market is that if you put small numbers into big skills, that it can build big resources and enable business. And I think that's the key change of the tone of voice of insurance management, risk management in the organization. If you only practice fear, people will close their screens, close the dialogue, and close the debate. And I think moving forward, it's also the balance in getting the opportunity out, and don't say no, but make it, enable it, and that becomes more important in the new role.
Yeah. Got a really interesting question here. Right. If you were in front of your CEO and asked him or her what risk management means to them, what would be the answer? Carlo, you want to have a crack at that?
If you word, the risk management means to protect your chair.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, François?
Thank you, Frank. Always good questions. Huh? He knows what is it about. I think what risk management is, my CEO, he won't ask the question because he's practicing risk management. As risk manager, we are not the risk owners. We just are animators. We are just here to help people to understand that they are the real risk manager of the company. So my CEO won't ask this question.
Good answer. Bernard, whether it was either risk management or insurance management, what would be the question, do you think?
No, I think that the answer is already given. The question should be at his desk. It's ultimately the CEO that drives the total strategy of the organization forward with the team.
Yeah.
And part of that is risk management. We enable it with faults. But if I would answer it to Frank, it's not a real problem to make a mistake. It's stupid to make the same mistake twice. And I think that's one of the key things that we have to do in the function, is make sure that we focus on the opportunities and don't fuck up twice with the same error.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Another interesting question here, which is something that we don't really talk very much about, or haven't done recently, specifically with risk managers, is about digitization. The insurance market talks about it a lot, and talking about all the exciting opportunities and how they're investing lots of money and making themselves much more efficient. But how can risk managers truly embrace digitization? François?
They should. I think it's compulsory to embrace it, because digitalization is a risk and an opportunity, of course. So for skills, just to add what Carlo said, I think we won't be IT specialists, but you should understand all the system. I think it's my first point. Second point, digitalization is also use of data, and we can use data to help our assessment, to help risk management, but more we can use tools to help our day-to-day job. For instance, that's not why, because Frank asked a question, but we use a tool to localize all our employees worldwide. It's a travel tracker. So if I push a button, I know where my people are worldwide. And it's terrific, because when you have a problem, you know exactly what people are in the crisis, and I can communicate with them. So it's really an efficient tool. So we have to use it for risk mapping, for instance, to have specific tools, easy, and maybe also to prevent claims with low signal problems.
Yeah. Carlo?
I totally agree with François. Risk manager here now and in the future have to use big data because to provide any kind of analysis, risk scenarios, big data and digitalization is something that is should be in the tools of the risk manager.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine a risk manager without access to big data.
Well, there was not that long ago. I know what you mean nowadays. Bernard?
Well, I think digitalization is especially in the construction sector, is very important. Building information models is in an upsurge. Our people are moving away from paper to tablets. And that gives also opportunities to give prevention checklists at the start of the activity, very deep in the organization. There's a couple of hurdles you have to take before you're really at the ground with your boots in the mud before they start the operation. And it would be very good if we use the claims data to be really in the mud at the moment that the activity takes place, and do it like the aviation. If you start up an aeroplane, you go through a checklist. And I think that's one of the key things we're going to drive forwards in construction in the coming years, that actually happens.
Absolutely, 100%. Right, we have another question there on the critical area of supply chains. For many companies, COVID-19 has caused a shock throughout their supply chains. Absolutely. Have you witnessed this in your own company? And what would you say is your most important lesson as a risk manager when preparing for future shocks? Carlo.
Yeah, the most important lessons is that we are trying to diversify in different manner the vendors, geographical from the geographical point of view. You cannot have you cannot have furniture or the shipment that arrive from the other part of the world, because this could be let me say critical in case of a crisis like that. It's very important to diversify to have a diversification of the supply chains, to have a local vendor and in very close to the site of the project that you have to carry on. And this is very important. Let me say the most important thing is diversification of the supply chain and the vendors.
Absolutely. Bernard, supply chain, has this been a big question for you?
Yeah, I think we saw with COVID that especially getting big chunks of construction out of China became more difficult. So I think in recent projects, large projects, the debate was also on construction in Europe again. So I think that's a trend we see. Furthermore, diversification of sources is important. For some things like tunnel bore machines, we only have a couple of suppliers in Europe, and then also transportation of goods and equipment across the world becomes a more challenging event, which means that we need to also take more care about loading and stuff like that, marine risk.
Absolutely. François, we have 2 minutes left.
I totally agree with my colleagues. Just in addition, I think I will be more cautious on the BCP of my suppliers, because we didn't really have a look on their BCP. And secondly, at Eiffage, we bought a machine to make our surgical mask to be independent. It's a solution also.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got 1 minute before we wrap up. I'm going to ask you one very quick question. I want one very quick answer. What is risk management leadership? François.
Leadership is to be recognized as a business partner.
Good. Carlo?
Leadership is a mix of capability, passion, problem-solving attitude, and team building.
Very clever. Yeah. Bernard?
Yeah, well, it's all François and Carlo said. But I think it's I would like to add the mind state.
Yeah.
And that's being old-fashioned. And old-fashioned in my mind also means that we need to have an eye on the other interest of parties involved. And don't forget them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, really important point. Okay, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for a really interesting, engaging discussion. Thank you to the audience for taking part with lots of interesting questions there, which is great. Right, don't forget, we have the final live ceremony tomorrow from 4:30 to 5:30 Central European time, when the winners will be announced. So look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow, and thanks again for taking part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.